And this first panel is going to be led by Sara Jo Fischer. And Sara Jo Fischer was asked to be the moderator because she was the curator of the artist advocacy exhibit. As you know, as Matt mentioned, David and I have been partners in this entire testimony project, and neither one of us is a curator. And we agree on about 85% of things.
Rules.
Right. And so, and there's 15% where we disagree, and we're both bullheaded. And so we'd say, you know, I think it should go here. I think it should go there. And then we're like, you know what? We need a professional curator to help break the ties. And one day, a few months ago, I sat down at a dinner party and I introduced myself to the person next to me. And she's like, oh, I'm Sara Jo Fischer. I'm a curator. And I said, oh, you're kidding. I need a curator. What kind of curation do you do? And she said, I do art as advocacy. And I said, I think I need your help. And literally, Sara Jo showed up unpaid the very next morning and has been working tirelessly on this project ever since then. So thank you so much, Sara Jo.
Good morning, everyone. Before I begin, I want to just thank the Center for Bioethics and Humanities at CU Anschutz for allowing me the honor to participate in the Advocating for Children in Migration. As we all are aware, we come to the table with our own perspectives from our life experience, and we have unique work here to discuss. So what I would like to do is thank the panelists for their incredible, phenomenal creativity and talk with them about how they became involved in this. And before I begin, I want to say that art as advocacy, in my humble opinion, is one of the most powerful tools that we can use in circumstances like this. Art is the universal language, no matter what the form. And it is incredibly painful and powerful to look at this exhibition as a whole. But as I am sure all of you will attest to, it is absolutely necessary. I want to first tell you a little bit about myself. I began using art as advocacy in the 90s. I worked on an exhibition that I co-curated for Anne Frank in the World called Celebrating Diversity. I then worked with the International Folk Art Market in Santa Fe for the Barros and Plomo potters in Oaxaca, Mexico. I worked with Comic Relief on help to support healthcare for the homeless in Los Angeles. In an effort to be completely transparent, I want you to know that these panelists have just met. We did attempt to have a very brief conversation on the phone, but I'm hoping that that will serve us in terms of having a very dynamic and fluid conversation today. I'd like to start by introducing first Mirelle Ortega. She's an award-winning Mexican artist and writer for Kid Lit and animation based in Los Angeles. She's the author and illustrator of The River of Mariposas and Magic, Once Upon a Faraway Land, for which she received a 2023 Porta Belpré Award for illustration and an International Latino Book Awards medal. Next, I would like to introduce Mauricio Cordero. He is a lecturer in comparative media studies and writing department at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He teaches a comprehensive course on comic book creation. He's currently working on his first full-length graphic novel, Be Still, Dirt Hill. He is the editor-in-chief and founder of Border X, a crisis in graphic detail, which documented the border crisis using the testimonies. And these images are wrapping the outside of the building here, which we refer to as the drum. Andra Atkins serves as an educational technology manager with Teachstone. They are a self-described accidental activist driven to do something They use the testimonies and the newly explored medium of watercolor every day for an entire year to create awareness and show support for the children and the families. A selection of these works are in the gallery from the 365 days. Andra is on the screen here joining us from her home. Brandon Curl is a creative director and copywriter at GSDM in Austin, Texas, and he lives and works remotely from Houston, having discovered and mastered the art of remote working long before it was cool. Brandon is passionate about his writing and his own briefs and using the power of creativity to make a difference for his clients and the world. The children's book he co-created, Hear My Voice, Escucha Mi Voz, used the real testimonies of the children detained at the border to raise awareness and funding for the children in migration, and was named one of the best books of the year by the New York Public Library. It has also received many other awards, I might add. Daniela Martin del Campo is a Mexican illustrator who takes pride and inspiration in her cultural background. She creates colorful and symbolic illustrations that reflect the folklore of her country. Travel and language are her other passions, which allow her to understand the way of other cultures and their ways of thinking. Her work has been displayed at the Bologna Children's Book Fair, and some of her clients include the Washington Post, Workman Publishing, Disney Plus, and Penguin Random House. She believes in the power of the images to transmit strong messages. Starless Night from Hear My Voice, Escucha Mi Voz, is in the gallery also. I welcome all of you. I'd like to start by asking each of you to tell me a little bit about how you became aware of the project and a little bit about the process that you used to make the selection that inspired you. I'd like to start with Andra.
Hi, everyone. So as stated earlier, it might be about Warren. It's about Warren. I first got involved when I heard Warren on Pod Save America, and I realized that she was telling a story I'd heard the year before. And I was horrified the year before, and I was horrified that year, and I realized I had forgotten. There was so much going on in those years. Everything was an emergency, and it wasn't that people didn't care, it's that there was always something else. I am very much an introvert. I work in tech. I am not your average artist, but I knew this is something I could do. I had just picked up watercolor just for fun. I really am not even a painter. I would consider myself like more into drawing as of my major. And I had never done watercolor until about 40 days before the beginning of this project. So that was kind of my muse at the moment. And I was like, all right, let's go. We've got this incredible resource of these live testimonies from these children. And I have an art desk and some materials. Let's go for it. I did 3 sketches, and then I reached out to a friend online. I had like 150 followers on Twitter or something. And I asked just if she would share it. And she had a huge audience, and she did. And overnight I got 10,000 followers. And I was like, well, I am locked into this now. I had thought I was just kind of going to do it for my friends and we'll see what happens. But it took on a life of its own and really kind of formed a community around it. And my intention was that the art will draw people in because people see something interesting and they stop and click. And then they read these testimonies and they remember. That's what I wanted. I had forgotten, and I wanted people to remember every day.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think we'll start here with Brandon and just move this way. The same question, please.
Sure. Yeah. Like Andra, I listened to the same episode of Pod Save America, so shout out Pod Save America. And heard Warren's interview and felt like I also wanted to do something about it. And a year before, is it not on? Oh, is that better? How's that? Better? Let me angle it. There you go. So yeah, I work in advertising. Most of my day I spend writing commercials for pizza or credit cards or hotels. So not world-changing stuff. But I had been to a conference in 2018 with some other advertising professionals, and I had met somebody who worked on a project called the Imaginary Friends Society, which maybe some of you in the medical community have heard of. It's was done for the Pediatric Brain Tumor Foundation, where they created these cartoons to basically explain to kids like that were going through chemotherapy or losing their hair, like what's happening or what's going on, but in a way that was more accessible to them. And it was an incredible project. And she told me that creativity is a superpower. And not just in the way that, you know, artists necessarily have, but any of us have as problem solvers, to use creativity in original ways. And that really just blew my mind, that I could use creativity to solve other problems, not just how to sell pizza. And so when I heard this podcast episode and Warren was literally asking for people to help, I thought like, well, what can I do? How can I help? And how can I create this pro bono project at my agency to do something about it? And so that was the genesis of what later became the children's book. And eventually, a couple of months later, reaching out to some amazing illustrators to actually illustrate that book.
Thank you. Mirelle?
Yeah, and I was one of the illustrators of each. So yeah, I heard of it from them. Actually, they emailed me about they had these testimonies and they wanted to put it together, and they needed illustrators to work on it. And they sent me the manuscript that they had at the time, which is, I think, exactly the same that we ended up with. And I remember I read it and I cried and I was like, yeah, absolutely. What do you need from me? And at the time, we were just talking about it. At the time, they really wanted to have it done immediately. Like they were like, yeah, we need it to be done in a month. And I was like, no. It takes a long time. So I said, I have a lot of friends who are artists who like, would you mind doing this not as a one artist project, but like different artists doing different spreads, kind of like an anthology, which I also thought was a great idea because it isn't a singular voice that you read in this. It's a lot of different testimonies. So they were like, oh, okay. And I was like, yeah, great. So I wrangled a couple of my friends and I sent them over to them. And we started working, and it was a pretty fast turnaround.
You guys were incredibly fast, yeah.
And yeah, and then we kind of waited because the project kind of took a different life. Like I think the publisher got involved, and so we were excited about that. I mean, it's always good when it's like something that will give the book even more of a, you know, global audience, or it will reach more people. Through that, I'm really excited about all the awards it won, and you know, the selection for the library, it's priceless. So,
Thank you, Mauricio.
Starts off with rage and more rage, and then a little sprinkle of rage. And I began doing what I thought were funny comics about that former guy. And it just wasn't funny. It was, there's no way to make fun of this person because they were so much stranger than anything I could come up with, and things got dated. And so I just shelved that, continued to rage. And then when I started hearing about the crisis and read a few articles, I didn't know who Warren was at the time, but I was reading about Senator Merkley, and I decided I needed to do something concrete or I would explode or Hulk out or both. And so I contacted Project Amplify, and within minutes, Warren responded to me because I suggested to a few artists we could do this. And they're like, yeah, but what do we do? What do we do? And I was like, well, we write about it. What do we write about? And I was just getting nothing. No one could really articulate in a way that they felt confident putting out into the world. And then when I discovered the declarations, I started reading them. I made the mistake of reading all of them. And I started to parse them out and send little packets to a few artists. I did the first one myself. I illustrated it. I think it's over on the wall over there. And then artists started to say, yeah, okay, I get it. I can do this. This is not, I don't have to fix the entire problem. I just have to focus and bring truth to one small aspect. And this type of, rhizomatic storytelling is something that I continue to explore, where an issue is too large to have one voice represent the phenomenon. So having 70 artists or 70 contributors from around the world really helped that out, and some went into the genre of science fiction to tell the story. I worked with a historian at Berkeley, to tell a story of the first border crisis when Americans were invading the Mexican border. And so it grew, and my rage dissipated to the point where David yesterday was taking me around the show. And at one point he told me how people who were witnessing the work had broken down in tears. And I was a little shocked myself with my one-word answer. I just looked at him and said, good. And not really realizing what I was saying by saying good, because being so involved in the work, you become sort of a nerd. You're not feeling that pain. And so my one-word answer was like, I'm glad that this work continues to do what it set out to and express that feeling that birthed the work.
Thank you, Mauricio. Daniela.
Well, of course, I found out about the situation from the news in my country, because it was a news about my people, right? So, of course, we were all outraged, but not really knowing what we could do, from our positions. And then suddenly one day, us illustrators, we make a lot of connections, as you can see. We're all connected, and I had a group with my friends, and one of my friends who is also in the book and is friends with Cecilia Ruiz, who is the artist who did the cover for our book. She was like, there's this project and we can help by illustrating these testimonies. Are you in? And of course I was like, yeah, of course I'm in. And that's how I got into the project, just by my friends in Mexico.
I think about artists, the perception of many people is that they work in their studios kind of isolated. And I know many of you collaborated, and it must have been helpful to have people who were also commiserating with your experience, to have that community. Andra, on the other hand, worked solely, and I can't even fathom the deep psychic wounding that might cause in someone, because I laid out all of your work to make some selections after David and Warren did, and it literally caused me nightmares, and I am not kidding about that. So I'm just wondering about how the experience of not only creating, but considering the feedback from your audience, and if you might speak to that a bit.
Sure. So in one way, I was creating alone. I, had my art desk after I got home from work, sit down, pick something, paint it. But definitely after it got some attention, it was a community. There were people who shared every day and tagged senators. And my best friend actually took over the website. So every day I would finish the painting and I would send it to him. I would put it on Twitter and Instagram. He would put it on the website. I had another friend in Canada who I connected with through this art, who helped me create postcards. And so we would put just the text in type over the paintings in like a postcard setting, and Warren used them for writing to senators. And so they're kind of formed a community, even though I didn't have one. at the end, I had an illustrator who was going through and just doing a like slight illustration on it every day, and he would share those. I worked with Envoys for Humanity, which was formerly Envoys for Beto, and they had letter writing campaigns for battleground states. And so I would create live in their sessions as they invited artists and musicians in to play. So it was difficult. I was sort of alone, but I think that the power of like digital community really got me through, because I knew that people were waiting for me to post. I knew that if I didn't, people would notice. I knew that there were, I had my people, and if I absolutely couldn't do it, I could call my best friend and rant to him, and he'd be like, okay, now paint. So.
Thank you. Brandon, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when it comes to a project like this, you'll be surprised how many people you know. I think, you know, obviously, you know, this story kind of brought out the worst part of humanity, but also the best. And when we came up with this project and we're looking for something to do, you know, we literally went to the moon and back to publish this, literally, in that I'm sure the illustrators were very frustrated with us to some degree, because we had them published so quickly. We're like, hey, we need these illustrations by October. We have to get this published. We knew nothing. I come from advertising, about publishing a children's book. You, I'm sure, knew more about it than I did. And so we're trying to find somebody to publish the book. We have all the illustrations. It's October now. We've got the book, but we have no way of figuring out how to get it published. And so I'm reaching out to producers that I work with in the commercial industry. One of my producers connects me to a guy who runs a production company. He worked with Terry Virts, who was the space shuttle commander of the International Space Station. And he had just written like a children's book, or not a children's book, a book. He had written a book that was coming out. And so he connected me with his literary agent, who then connected me with a publisher. So I, you know, obviously I didn't know any of those people beforehand, but everybody that heard about the project, from Mirelle to Daniela, as soon as they heard about it, was right away. We didn't get a single no. It was like, yes, what can I do? And so I think once that started, everybody just wanted to be involved and to help. So to answer your original question, like, yeah, I mean, it can be like, you know, you feel isolated potentially, especially in these moments. But I think like the common humanity that we all have, I think brings us together to do something bigger. And that's definitely something we experienced on this project.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think artists love community. Like, we love being around other creative people. We actually don't feel good if we're not, which is why we moved to big cities. Even though we need like the time and space to work on the things, we just always need feedback. Like I'm always showing my work to other people, because sometimes you're so close, you can't really tell. And I also think people who are drawn to art or becoming artists feel like it is a language, and it gives you a voice, and most of us want to say something with it. So yeah, it's like, I think you and I had a conversation, and you asked me like, what was the moment that you were like, you need to do it? And I was like, there was no hesitation, really. Like, you were asking me to help you talk about this, and it's important. Of course I'm going to help you. It doesn't like it. I never, you know, you don't really even think about it. You just kind of do it, kind of jump. And I think I had no hesitation saying to my friends either. I was like, hey, this is the saddest thing you're going to read. But, you know, do you want to be, everyone was in, like, there was no one who was like, no, I have like, everyone kind of like put times out of their schedules to do it.
Mauricio,
Same.
I know you initially told me that there were several artists that were like, oh, I don't know how to do this, until you showed them your work, and then the light bulb went on.
Yeah, that was part of it. And you know, I just really tried to put myself out there as much as I could. We did like I offered drink and draws, and just like social events to try to get people to come together and draw on. And supported each other while we were doing this. I threw a party at my place right before we moved out to Stanford for a year, long story, and before COVID. And a bunch of musicians came and people who didn't necessarily do art. And they were like, well, can we do a benefit concert? Yes, of course. Some artists were unavailable. Raul III, who is extremely busy, at the time he was like, well, I'd like to help, but I'm doing 7 books right now. So he donated artwork that was auctioned off to help. The proceeds went to the South Texas Human Rights Center. So that was part of the urgency. And also I was asking the impossible. I said, look, we need to get this book out within 6 months while the issue is on everyone's minds. And people either said it's impossible or, okay, let's start, and the ones in my philosophy is always look for the helpers. Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Always look for the helpers. And I found many helpers, thankfully.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, like I think for us it was a little different because we were not in touch with the artists from the States. It was just the 3 of us in Mexico working together, but we're very close friends, the 3 of us. So every day we would because this was not an easy project. We are like you said, Brandon, like most of the time I'm drawing for other kind of projects, like a pizza brand or something. And all of a sudden it's like the weight of the words of these children are in your hands. And it was like, we were not sure how to approach that and to give the dignity, but also like the appeal. And it was very important for us to talk every day and just like take all the emotions, like this is heartbreaking. Have you read this? Have you seen this news? Watch this video. And we were all like getting all the sensitivity together and processing it, just being company.
I'm very curious to know from all of you, how has shining a light on this travesty affected your perception and definition of the American dream? And I'd like to start with you, Daniela.
Yeah, I was talking with Sara about this a few days ago, and I think particularly the testimony that I had to illustrate spoke a lot about the American dream, and it got me. I'm more on the rage side of activism, like you. Like I got so mad by this stuff, and I was like, to me, it was the irony because my testimony is about these kids who are there in the cage, and this police approached them and is like, oh, do you know how many stars there are in the American flag? If you can tell me, you're like free to go, And it's like, oh my God, what a horrible thing to play with a kid like this. And of course, I don't know it. A kid doesn't know it. And when they got it wrong, the police just slammed the door at them. So to me, that slam is like so violent. To me, it's like I could hear like if it was a glass door, it would shatter, no? And like the stars in the flag would shatter for them, like all this dream. Because when people migrate, it's not just like they want to do tourism or something like this. Like people in migration are really looking for a better thing in their lives. They are really looking for giving their children a better life than they have. So I think the world always looks at America and we think of this, like the American dream. It has always been there, this phrase in our minds. And to me, it was very ironic that this question about the flag, about the dream itself, would shatter their dreams and their illusions. So to me, it's like all the people who come here searching for an opportunity should be granted with help, not with that violence. So to me, it was like, oh my God, is this the American dream? Like, yeah, it made me think about that.
Mauricio.
I can answer that. I haven't had enough coffee and it's too early for gin. So yeah, what a question, sir.
I think it gets to the heart of it.
Yeah, turn off my mic. No, the American dream, I think, is in this room right here. It's sad to say it's the people who face the rage and are productive despite the rage. Because this is not a time for, hand-holding the people who want to commit these atrocities. And I say want because it seems that It's not by accident. Well, it's not by accident. But yeah, I'm a little too flustered to really say anything too intelligent. So I'll just pass it along, put you on the spot.
It is a punch in the gut. It's interesting for me. I came to this country in 2015 and I was 25 years old, and I came under very different circumstances of this kids or the people who migrate. I came to pursuing higher education. I had a grant from the Mexican government to pursue a master's degree in visual development. So that's what I came here to do. And I've always really appreciated the American idealism. And I don't think it's dead. I think, this room is a good example that it isn't. But yeah, it definitely felt, especially after the election, and we all know the dark times that I'm not sure we're super out of. But it definitely felt like it was demoralizing. And to see children of everyone just being treated that way was really, really, it really hurt. I don't think just for us, I think for everyone. Because it is a very, people think of living a home that you love and how hard it is. And because you really do, people who come to this country who walk all the way here, or ride the train or just cross that border, risking their lives, love their home. They are running because they are scared. And it is horrible to feel that way. When you love a place, but you're also, that you can't grow there.
Thank you.
I think that's well said. I think that's what resonated with me too in reading the stories, the persecution that they were coming from. For me, I was raised Jewish, and so just growing up with this lesson of how we should treat immigrants, or if we had treated immigrants better, more lives could have been saved. And when we were coming up with a name for this book, we went through so many titles, and one of them at one point was The Golden Door. And that's because there's an inscription on the Statue of Liberty, and which most people know, but the very end of the inscription is this long poem is about holding her torch aloft next to the golden door, being the American dream, and how tarnished this golden door had kind of become, in this day and age. And so I think for me, it was important to try to remind people of that ideal that I think we had, especially for children who are so innocent. And I think in the book, I think it really comes through, and what I really liked about the very last illustration or page of the book is the dreams of the children, which were taken in the testimony, where they just talk about their dreams, and they just wanted to go live with family who lived in Massachusetts or Nebraska, wherever, all over the country. It was surprising to me to learn that, actually. And then their dreams were really just, I want to go to school. I want to grow up. I want to play with my sister, that was their dream, and so wanting to do whatever we could to make that happen.
I do want to just touch on the brilliance of this book as a children's story. I have to say that, to me, was one of the most powerful things about it, that you made it a children's book. Because I think if you were to just put the testimonies out there,
right,
knowing they're the children's voices, but they're horrifying,
right,
truths about the way that they were mistreated and harmed and abused and neglected. And here you discovered a way to give them the voice and making it a children's book. I'd like you to just talk about how you came to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I probably should have backed up because not everybody knows the context of the book or the idea. But the idea was basically we had these 70 pages or 100 pages of testimony. It was like 70 different testimony, and like Mauricio read through them all and was devastated. It was a mistake to read through them all, and I'm a writer by trade, and wanted to write this book, but didn't want to write a single word. Like, none of the words in this book are anything that I wrote. It's all the words from the kids. And so we literally took their quotes and started writing them on index cards. And we would notice common themes about why they were leaving or the experience, what they were experiencing. And we put them up on a wall and just started arranging them into a story. And from there, we basically had a page for each illustrator. And the reason, to your question of why a children's book, was I think we wanted something that was intentionally shocking. Like, this is not the subject for a children's book. And yet it is. It's several children's story. And so we felt like it was important to put it in that context to sort of wake people up to what was happening. So that was the reason that we decided to do a children's book.
Bravo. Andra, I'd like you just to share your perception of how this affected you and your idea of the American dream.
Sure. So I think for me, it really hit me that we have no control over where we're born. I didn't do anything to deserve to be a US citizen. I didn't come here. I wasn't a migrant. I was born white, and that gives me privilege. I could have sat this one out. And that for me was a responsibility, that this is being done. And if I am silent, it's being done in my name. And I think that's really what drove me in kind of like the American dream, is that responsibility, that this is what is being done and this is horrific and there's nothing I can do to stop it, but I can do this to bear witness.
Thank you all. I want to touch on one more thing that I think is really important before we go to questions from the audience and the chat. And that is that when you do a project such as this, you can't often, in terms of timing, as Brandon Mirelle said, when Brandon thought, well, maybe I can get this great illustrator to do a whole book. And she was like, wait a minute, I'm going to call my friends and my colleagues. And you can't just manifest something of this powerful nature and then necessarily have the platform to show it, which is one of the reasons I'm very grateful for the opportunity to do this here. But I'm wondering, as a curator, I did endeavor to design this exhibition for the possibility of travel. So I ask all of you to think about opportunities where we might be able to show this and give it more of an opportunity to continue to amplify the voices of these children. And so if any of you have ideas here in the audience or online, please feel free to share those ideas. I'd just like to ask first the panelists just for a moment if they have anything that comes to mind of where we might be able to travel this exhibition or exhibition spaces. I will just mention that when I worked on the Anne Frank and the World exhibition and we decided to curate or co-curate an exhibition to accompany it, we went into some of the malls where the stores were closing down because it gave us not only the space, but the traffic, so we weren't singing to the choir, so to speak. So I'm just curious if any of you have any ideas.
Maybe reach out to like other ONGs, maybe like Amnesty International, because they do a lot of artistic projects too. They have exhibitions and they have a whole art department going on there. So maybe they would be interested.
I nerded out with David about the technology used to print these, and this. Sorry. I said I nerded out with David about the technology. I'm a print nerd, and I'm just amazed at how easy these are. These are like stickers almost that do not take the paint off the walls, and the print is stunning. I cannot believe So anywhere really, but specifically you and I will have conversation about Boston Public Library, Copley Center, MIT Museum, Longshot, Boston City Hall, Newberry Library in Chicago. And I will talk to my new department when I start working at Northwestern.
I'm very excited about all of it. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I think libraries are a great resource. I think I mentioned this book to a few librarian friends when I was doing an event there last weekend, and they didn't know about it and they were very intrigued. Because I also, it wasn't weird to me that you guys decided to do a children's book about it, even though it is a very heavy topic. But I'm like, it is a children's story from their voices. This is what some children go through. So yeah, I think I'll come up with more ideas. I don't have any ideas at the top of my head.
Well, as a librarian's daughter, I love the idea of the library.
My brain goes to I guess TikTok or like the new age, like social media, going to where the people are. Maybe that's just because I come from advertising where we make ads on TikTok all the time. But I think just going to where people are. There are innovative ways that you can do things with these platforms. There was an incredible thing, speaking of the New York Public Library, they did on Instagram stories a year ago, where they would turn novels into Instagram stories, where you could read the novel on Instagram. You kind of hold your thumb on the page to pause the story, and then when you let go, it would advance, and you could click through to each page. And it was done all for this vertical space on your phone. It was incredibly innovative, and it was a great way of bringing back these great classics. So there's a lot of ways you can innovate traditional media for kind of this new media. And then additionally with that, I would say, like, partnering with influencers, people who have platforms that I'm sure are passionate about these issues, and using their platforms to kind of share the story as well.
I love that idea also, because it will help us to have these stories endure and create a historical document, which is very important. Andra, anything you'd like to share?
Sure. So my pieces have actually been shown a couple of places. Colleges. I think we had an exhibit at Sweetbriar College, and it was incredible. Also, just private art groups. My first exhibit was in Indiana, Goshen, Indiana, and it was my coworker and their like film group. They saw what we were doing and were very interested. And so I think just ask people who care. And I think they know of places. Also, I had an exhibit at a framing company for a while, just someone who followed and asked if they could share some of my art as like a spotlight artist of the month. And so I sent it to Oregon. I've never been there, but my art has been a lot of places I haven't. And I think that, yeah, I think people know places.
Okay, I'd like to turn it over to people in the audience if anyone has any questions or comments.
I just wanted to add to what Audra just said. I'm very involved over at DU, and with the galleries that are over there and the opportunities for the college world to get involved in this passion, I think is very, very important. The other, and I don't know if it still exists, many, many years ago, I had a short-term job at Smithsonian, and we piloted traveling exhibits to see where we could take it in the United States. And it might be worthwhile to contact somebody at Smithsonian and say, does something like this exist now? I did this in '91, so I don't even know what exists today, but something like that. And the other place that I'm thinking of is like small towns. When you mentioned libraries in Columbus, Indiana, there's an incredible library, and there was a film that actually, a lot of it was a documentary, took place in that library. And I think that would be a phenomenal place to take an exhibit like this.
Thank you so much.
Can I share on that?
I grew up in Chicago, and one of the things that I think of about a way to share this content is public transportation. Putting this on train stations, bus stations. You know, Denver's kind of a train wreck for public trans, but most big cities have an incredible, and even small cities have an incredible opportunity on buses, on trains, on waiting areas to put a poster with a QR code and a quote. Just, I think it's a great way to kind of, you know, get people interested in a very kind of a captive audience for a short term, but it can turn them on to really wanting to know more and being moved while they're waiting. So just another of many.
Please go ahead.
Minute, right? Before the sound goes off. First of all, I just want to thank the panelists. This was really incredibly moving and powerful testimony of all of you. And I just feel very lucky to be able to be here and listen to you all. A couple of thoughts I had for that last question was, one is the American Academy of Pediatrics has 60,000 or over 60,000 members. They have an annual conference every year that has tens of thousands of people that attend from all over the world. They almost always have the perfect venue to show artwork because they're usually in enormous hotels. So that is one thing, and I'd be really happy to connect you with people at the AAP.
Thank you.
The other thing is, I kind of thought that this should be filmed, and that the exhibition should be filmed, and your testimony should be filmed, and that is one way to get out this to an enormously huge audience, because like what you've said is so powerful, and for as many people to hear this as possible, I think would be super important. Yeah, I'll do that.
Thank you. Let's turn to the internet just for a moment.
Sure, Sarah. We have one question from Hart. Just said, first, thanks to everyone for dedicating your time and talent to this powerful, important work. Andra's quote, "There's always something else," is a reminder of how effectively news media can draw our attention from one crisis to another. What has the online and traditional media response been to this project?
I would just start by saying Andra had the most incredible experience by sharing it and waking up the next morning with 10,000 followers. So obviously there's a lot of power in that. I would also just like to say that I think as much PR and that we can get from not just local, but art publications, the local media, the publications of things that are going on around in and around Colorado generally are very important aspects. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, the book, we definitely had like a lot of online. I mean, Warren was on CNN talking about it. We definitely had like a lot of like traditional press, PR, and then online, there was a lot of people just reading the book and sharing photos of themselves on Instagram or TikTok. We had like some children like reading the book and talking about how important it was, which was super powerful. So yeah, there was a great response online as well.
Can I just add to that, Brandon, that Brandon and I talked recently because I had given a talk in Northern California with some of the social workers that are working to provide wraparound support for children arriving to the United States. And those social workers said that Hear My Voice, Escucha Mi Voz, is the most powerful icebreaker they have when they bring together a group of these children, that they said historically it would take months for these groups of children who are newly arrived to feel comfortable with each other and start to open up about their experiences. And then after they received the children's book, they started to read the children's book with these groups in the first session, and immediately the kids would say, "Yeah, that happened to me. Yeah, do you remember how cold it was in the ice box? Yeah, we had this guard and he blah, 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 blah." And immediately the kids are bonding. And the social work said that the social worker said that this book has brought so much healing to the population of children that they serve. And so although, I think that initially we were intending in all of these projects to raise public awareness and embed this in, American history, because it was being whitewashed. But then now that the works are out there, we're discovering the affirmation and the healing that they're providing to children who previously were ashamed to say this happened to me, and now it's helping them to move forward and heal. And so thank you to all of you, who made that happen.
Please.
Thank you for sharing both the work and what drew you to it. It's inspiring, it's powerful. I want to follow up on this idea of productivity. And, Mauricio, you talked about taking rage and making it productive. And I wanted to hear maybe from each of you about how you viewed what you expected this to be in terms of productivity, and what that meant to you when you started. And then I'd like to hear now that things have taken off and they've grown so much bigger than maybe some of you expected. What do you think about it now? And I put in this, it comes in the context of, Andra saying she expected to get 150 followers and has 10,000, but now it's grown and her work's going places she hasn't, or you're seeing these things happen. And maybe you have a different expectation, Brandon, when you're creating a book about where it might go. But I'd like to hear from each of you about what you thought it might be, and what you meant by the productivity, and where you think it would go from here.
I'll start, I guess. It's a great question. Yeah, I think initially what Warren was kind of saying, wanted like awareness, to raise awareness, wanted to raise money because the sales of the book also like benefit nonprofits, wanted to, I don't know. It's just I'm just still stunned by what Warren said. Like, it's so impactful to hear like the ongoing impact the book has, which I did not expect, or how it's used as a tool. And, initially we meant for it to be more of like a provocative sort of thing to grab awareness. And then after we started talking with the publishing company, they were saying, this could be really useful in classrooms. And so there's a whole back matter that's added to the book with like a lesson plan. There's like a teaching guide that comes with it of how you can teach it in schools. And so seeing that for me has been the most impactful thing beyond what I could have expected.
Yeah, similarly, when we started talking about the project, it definitely felt more like a way to get funds to donate for the things that were happening right there, which is why it needed to be done so immediately. But yeah, when I got my copy of the book, I thought that's the first thing that came to my mind was this is going to be such a wonderful tool to help these children. And I didn't expect it to, come out that way. So I was really happy about that. I think a lot in like how wonderful it is to have something published and have your words kind of remain even after you're gone. So what Warren was saying, that it was really like to put it out there and like this happened, like we were there, we're not crazy. And to have people be able to discover it, because I'm sure a lot of people didn't hear about it initially. And to have this now where they can kind of like get the full impact of it in a way. I think it's wonderful. It really went places I never expected.
Likewise, the turnaround time was a huge factor. Why I didn't approach publishers and decided to go the self-publishing route. And at the beginning, I thought, am I going to have to do this entire book myself? And then people started to respond, and then I was getting responses from people I didn't know and didn't believe they were contacting me, like Peter Cooper. You read Spy vs. Spy in Mad Magazine. He does that and other illustrations I'm sure you've seen. Lan Pitts, Tom Hart. And so it just kind of steamrolled in terms of quality, and to talk to professionals in your field that operate on that level and feel just about as passionately as you do about the topic just really created some strong bonds. And we continue to talk about new projects that we're going to do. And as far as the distribution, I will brag about one thing. Timing can work against you, but this came out right at peak COVID. No one could get paper. No one was publishing. DC, Marvel shut down. So this was actually the #1 book on Amazon, graphic novels, for 1 week. Did not translate to a lot of sales, but bragging rights.
Bravo.
Well, I think sometimes as an illustrator, it's kind of weird to work because you don't necessarily know the effect you have on people through your work, because you just finish an illustration, you send it, and it's like a message in a bottle. You may, you put it out in the world, and maybe you won't never get an answer. But just now, like just hearing what Warren just said about these kids reading the book and having the confidence and the healing, it brought tears to my eyes because I could never imagine this could happen. And like this whole experience and talking to Sara, it made me think a lot, like, what is our place as artists in the problems of the world? Because sometimes I feel like I only make drawings. That's like powerless in a way. That's why I thought, but I think these kind of problems, like having kids in cages, is just the peak of the iceberg of a problem. And that's the most visible part, but it's just based on a whole series of cultural approaches to other people. Like having a kid in a cage, that kind of action is just possible because you have made a whole, you have a lot of thoughts, of cultural thoughts, creating that possibility, just seeing another human as not like you, like yourself, as a different thing. And I think that's our place in like artists, like just putting these things available for everyone and just changing the mind for everyone. And just hearing this makes me think we're doing it right. Like this is the job,
Thank you. I just in closing want to say that for me, harnessing the innate power of creativity to address pressing issues and create opportunity for positive change is a very vital tool for political and social movements. So I hope we all will continue to endeavor to shine a light on the injustices. And I thank you all for serving humanity.
One more thing, don't go yet. Andra's so humble. She said, oh, this frame shop called me and asked if they could show some of my work. And what she didn't tell you is that her work has actually been displayed in the halls of Congress. And I'm just like shocked that she didn't mention that in all of the venues. And I do think that, in addition to some of the other ideas that you mentioned, that we should try and go back there with the larger collection of works and, have this in a place where our lawmakers are reminded about what is happening as long as they don't pass legislation to change it. And that's a big part of what we're trying to do here at the University of Colorado, is to support research-informed and evidence-based policy.